The next month or two is going to be massive for LEGO modular fans. We're expecting to get up to 3 new modular compatible or nearly modular compatible buildings during this time span, and we are kicking things off with the new X mansion that LEGO has just announced. Now for $330 US, you can get a nearly 3,100 piece X mansion with 10 minifigs and a buildable Sentinel. Now, there is an important question here. Does this set have enough detail to be a good modular building? Now, there's a lot to unpack here, so let's go ahead and dive in. This set continues the pattern of LEGO releasing modular buildings for the Marvel's theme. You've got the Sanctum Sanctorum, the Daily Bugle, and the Avengers Tower. Now this one does have some more pieces than the Sanctum Sanctorum, although it is less than the Daily Bugle and Avengers Tower. It's also got one more minifig than the Sanctum Sanctorum, but significantly fewer minifigs than the other two as well. And in terms of scale, I think this one is going to work better with the Sanctum Sanctorum and the rest of the Icons modular buildings because it's not a skyscraper like the Daily Bugle or the Avengers Tower. So in many ways, this might be a better fit in your modular city based on that alone compared to the two larger, taller buildings. But that's where we want to investigate whether or not this really fits in well with a modular city, including some of the building techniques, the pieces, and the details that we know and love in the modular theme. Now, as we investigate modular compatibility, there are 3 key things that I'm looking out for. Now, the first one is whether or not you have the Technic pins along the side. We know that modular buildings have, beginning on the 9th stud, or 9 studs in, the 10th and 11th studs have a Technic brick, and then you have a 10 stud gap, then another Technic brick. Now, this set uses a 1x4 Technic brick on each of the fronts, and on the back, it does have that 1x2 Technic brick. So it does check off that particular box. If you don't like the 1x4 Technic brick, which is similar to what we have in the Sanctum Sanctorum, you can modify it if you want, but I don't think it's that big of a deal because it is compatible. The second thing is to make sure that the building itself does not overhang the edge of the base plates. This set uses 3 16x32 base plates in dark bluish gray and allows you to pull it apart actually, which is interesting and unique for a modular building, but the exterior walls do not overhang them. Now I will note a couple of interesting things here is that on one side, the right-hand side, you've got some windows that are facing the side, which is unique for modular buildings. The Icons modulars don't have those side windows. On the left-hand side, you've got some removable wall sections, which is similar to the Sanctum Sanctorum, and the Sanctum, you could rotate those or flip them around, and you might have some tentacles coming out that would make it not compatible with other modular buildings, or you could flip that to have the tentacles face the inside. This is very similar to that. So no problems here conflicting with other buildings around it, unless of course you want to put some green space because you have those windows looking out the right-hand side of the building. The third area of compatibility that I'm looking at is the sidewalk, and this set certainly has the dark bluish gray curb, or the light bluish gray curb, the dark bluish gray sidewalk, and some other features like the lamp post and some greenery and all that stuff that fits in, I think, reasonably well with what we see with modulars. Now, there is a little discrepancy here as the Marvel's modulars use a black lamp post. The Icons modulars use a white one. That's not a huge deal for me, and it's pretty easy to replace those if you want to, but there is a designated place for it, and despite the action scenes going on the sidewalk, you can probably fix those up if you wanted to make it look clean. So check, check, and check on those 3 objective compatibility standards. But, and this is the important thing, there is a subjective element to modular buildings. People love modular buildings because of the details that it provides, especially on the exterior. Now, I will say I've read comments from a lot of people who really enjoy interior details, but man, it's those exterior details that get people super excited about putting together modular buildings because of the building techniques and the way it looks oftentimes just is so incredible. Does this set measure up to those? That's where I'm skeptical. That's where I'm skeptical. I'm not sure this has the same level of detail that we would expect. Now, I do want to talk about some of the good things before moving into some of the things that I think are a bit more problematic. I do enjoy the light bluish gray double curved slopes along the corners of the buildings. I think that looks good. It's not brand new to modular buildings in terms of using the pieces that way. The bookshop uses it a little bit like that, but these do stand out, and I like the way that they round that out. I do like the use of angles. We like the use of angles and snot techniques in icons type sets. This has that, certainly with the roof peaks, using the plate hinges to build that angle. There's more snot techniques available that you can see in the chimney on one of the sides, as well as by the dome. They use some great techniques, and I like that they're doing that. One other snot element that I particularly enjoy is along the foundation. Other modular city buildings like the Fire Brigade and even the Natural History Museum use some snot work for stone. This one, though, does a nice job doing that along the base, and I appreciate that. I think that's a fantastic start to the building process. Another strong point that I want to highlight is all of the detailing on the interior. Guys, this is fantastic. There are so many tiled floors, there's so many bookshelves and rooms and all these different elements to the interiors. The Easter eggs are fantastic. You've got some cool parts usage. I love that it looks like we're getting some sand blue panels, 1x2 panels, which would be the first time we're seeing those in that color. I want to also shout out on the exterior, I forgot about this earlier, the sausage pieces in light blay, which is not all that common, as well as those vine pieces. We're only seeing those previously in a couple of sets, so those are nice additions to this set. So there's a lot going on here that I like, but there are some weak spots. In fact, one of the questions I think we have to address is how is it you get a set that is 48 studs long, that is a modular, fully compatible modular building, and yet it's about 1,000 pieces fewer than the most recent modular building of the same size, the Natural History Museum. That's a really interesting question, especially when you consider there are pieces for building the Sentinel. There are also lots of pieces used on the interior of this set. And so I think we need to examine how it is that we end up with so many fewer pieces. And the answer, by and large, is a lack of exterior detailing. There's so many examples of this. Let's check this out. We can compare this set, the X Mansion, to the Natural History Museum. And by the way, there are many people who weren't a huge fan of the Natural History Museum for either the color or because they didn't believe it was detailed enough as a modular building. And we're going to show you right here that this is even less detailed. Here are some examples. People love their facades for the modular building, and here we get 1x2x3 bricks in dark orange. That's less pieces that go into the brickwork on the front of the building as well as the sides. And so that saves you some pieces right there. Check out the stairs or the steps leading up to the entry as well as the columns. Look at what we see with the Natural History Museum. You've got much more detailed stairs. The columns in the Natural History Museum I know are shorter, but they're parts intensive. The ones at the X Mansion are simply the prefab column pieces. And even though you have the roller skate pieces on top of those columns here, they strike me as a bit of the wrong color. I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of them. It gives you some detailing, but not a whole lot of detailing in terms of using nice parts usage or snot techniques to pull some of that off. Another example of this, and this is really interesting how this works out. Check out the window detailing. In the X Mansion, you have a 1x2 modified plate with a door rail, 2 1x2x2 windows with a flat front, and then 2 plates. That adds up to 7 pieces. If you look at the Natural History Museum, you've got this framing, this tan framing around the windows, which include candle pieces, 1x2 rounded plates. You've got all this stuff that goes into the windows. It's like 25 to 30 pieces. Now, when you add up all of those windows on the front of the Natural History Museum, multiplied by about 20 more pieces, that adds up to a 200 to 300 pieces right there. And that doesn't include what we already mentioned with the columns and the steps. And then there are more details that are missing from this building compared to something like the Natural History Museum. Check out the roofing. Here we have dark blue roof slopes. We also don't have quite as much detailing or as many parts used to pull off the transition from the main facade of the walls to the roof itself. And on the Natural History Museum, you've got plenty of details. You've got a whole snot section with white ingots. You've got lots of roofing details with those curved windows and the dome. Check out the dome. The Natural History Museum is so parts intensive using all of this knot work. The dome for the X Mansion is very much straightforward. It still looks good there, but when you compare the two side by side, you can see how we get up to, yes, 1,000 more pieces for the Natural History Museum, even though it has the same width. Final thing I'll mention when it comes to the discrepancy in detailing from one to the other, the depth of the building. The Natural History Museum is largely 18 studs deep. The X Mansion, 12. By and large, 10 to 12 studs. That's pretty narrow. That's one reason why I think they have to have it be taken apart. You can pull the different base plates apart because you otherwise can't access all of those small rooms with your big adult hands. And so that's where we see section after section of this build, the lack of detail for the X Mansion compared to the Natural History Museum and other modulars. As we contemplate value, I think there's something else we want to ask, and that is, how is it that for the same price as the Natural History Museum, you're getting 1,000 pieces less? Now, you are getting a couple more minifigs in the X Mansion, but those minifigs don't add up to the same cost differential. Really what this comes down to is maybe some bigger pieces, like I mentioned, those 1x2x3 bricks that are going to be bigger than a typical brick you would use in a modular building. But of course, the elephant in the room is the licensed fee. This is a licensed set. You're going to pay more for it. And even though I think LEGO distributes these licensing fees across multiple themes to offset that cost, they're jacking the price up on this, hoping that X-Men fans and modular fans are going to go out and get this set. I mean, this price just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. When you think about the Natural History Museum has 1,000 more parts. It has printed pieces, stickers in the X Mansion. That's crazy, like so many stickers. If you don't like stickers, the X Mansion is not the set for you. Now, of course, this is consistent with the other Marvel modular buildings. So if you have those, you're not getting anything that you haven't already seen in terms of the amount of stickers. But this really comes down to the license tax that we see on these kinds of sets. And that may be off-putting for a lot of people. Another component to value is the minifigs. Now, you do get more minifigs in this set than the Natural History Museum, but the minifigs themselves are a bit controversial. I'm not a huge X-Men fan, so I'm not going to directly critique these, but I will note that many fans have talked about leg printing versus dual molds, reusing faces and torso pieces from other minifigs as potentially being problematic. The key example there is Xavier with the same torso that Michael Scott had in the Office set. So reusing some of those. I don't have a huge problem with some of that, but I understand why fans might not like all of the details in the minifigs, especially since we don't get as many minifigs as we did in the Daily Bugle or the Avengers Tower. Next, I want to consider the display value. Now, I know that a lot of people have been criticizing this building, myself included, for not having as much detail. I still think it's going to look good in your modular city. I don't think you're going to have friends over that are LEGO fans or not LEGO fans. They're going to look at your modular city and be like, wow, that X mansion or that mansion, that just doesn't seem to fit in terms of detail. They may not think it fits in because it doesn't have the same architecture, or having a mansion randomly thrown in your city may not go together, but the LEGO modular series is rather eclectic. Different types of architecture, different types of buildings. I don't think this is going to stand out in that regard in a negative way. However, you do want to think about how you're going to incorporate it into your city, in part because you've got those windows on the right-hand side. The alleyway in the back certainly has more of a story to it than any other modular building, and you might want to access that. And of course, the front of the building does have more green space than we're used to seeing in modular buildings. I will also note that many people do critique the Natural History Museum for not being detailed enough. This one fall short of that, so I can understand why many LEGO fans are skeptical of this set as a modular building. That said, I think it would be curious to know how this looks next to other modular buildings. Not only the Sanctum Sanctorum, but some of the more recent modulars like the Jazz Club and the Natural History Museum, but also some of the older ones. I'd love to see what this one looks like next to the Grand Emporium. And if you're curious about that, make sure you subscribe, because we are going to probably be getting this set and comparing it with other modulars. We have all of the official LEGO designed modular buildings, so we might be able to get quite a few really interesting combinations out of that. So I think one of the interesting things about this is that LEGO is giving us two 48 stud wide buildings that are modular compatible in the same year. Within 12 months of each other, we're getting this. Now, this is interesting because prior to this year, we have not had more than one 48 wide modular building. It was the Assembly Square. Now suddenly there's two on the market. I think it's fascinating, and I'm not sure if that was an intentional thing or that's just the way that these individual themes, icons, and Marvel just ended up having an overlap in that regard. It's also a similar style with the Natural History Museum. The dome, you've got some of the peaks on the roof, you've got the columns. And I think when you compare these two sets next to one another, the Natural History Museum stands out as just being better executed as an exterior detail and exterior facade. If you like X-Men, this is maybe a no-brainer for you if you have the money. But I'm looking at this as a modular fan, and is this something that I'm going to be getting? Is this worth $330? And I think the reality is, for many fans, it won't be worth that much money. You can get the Daily Bugle for $350, and it's got 500 more pieces and more than twice the amount of minifigs. You can get the Sanctum Sanctorum for $250, so $80 less, and it's not that much smaller in terms of pieces, like 300 pieces or so, and roughly the same minifigs. You could, of course, get the Natural History Museum itself. If you don't have that one yet, you could spend the same amount of money, get more pieces, and get a better detailed facade out of it, which is going to look better on your shelf or your modular city. So the $330 price tag, I'm not sold on. I might wait till there's not only a good gift with purchase and double insider points, but perhaps wait for it to go on sale at some point, although I'm not sure when, because I do think a lot of X-Men fans are going to really enjoy this particular set. The last thing I want to say is I think this is almost like a reverse modular building. The modular buildings are known for having great exterior detail and relatively limited interior detail. There are some that have great first floor details like the brick bank, even the Natural History Museum with some of the tiled floors, but the reality is as you work your way up the modular building, like in the Parisian Restaurant or the Green Grocer, or even to a certain extent the Assembly Square in some spots, you get less and less detailing. This one looks like it is jam-packed full of details on the interior throughout, and the trade-off was you don't get as much detailing and parts usage on the exterior. If that's a trade-off that is okay for you, that makes perfect sense. However, I know there are quite a few modular fans that really are focusing on those exterior details. So again, I'm with you on that. I'm a bit skeptical that it's as good as a normal modular, but given that it's modular compatible and it does look pretty good, I'm leaning toward picking this up pretty early on so that way we can see what it looks like in our modular city. Well, that's all we have for you today. Thanks for watching, and always remember to keep building together.